The text I'm going to preach out of is 1 Corinthians chapter 1. So if you want to go ahead there and, get ready. But before I get there, I just want to open up a little bit with some points. So it goes without saying that we are living in an unprecedented time where we are so saturated with information, nonstop. It's to the point where it's just like the air we breathe now. We don't even think about it. It's just like second nature. But if you just step back and just think about how much data and information that flies in our face, it's quite remarkable. Here's one exercise I invite you to do. Just take 15 minutes of taking inventory of what you do on your daily media diet. Checking your email, looking at your social media, your text messages. 15 minutes, take inventory of how much different topics, conversations, headlines, sources, voices that flew in your face in just that 15 minutes. It's kind of crazy. Then the visual I have is it's like the minute I open my laptop, it's like I open my front door and I'm in I-95, just like flying at my face. It's crazy. And, this is great. I think this is the reason why this is like the best time to be alive, because we have so much access. I think most of us here are old enough to have grown up and lived at the dawn of what we call the information age. It was it began in the 70s and 80s with the personal computing, the rise of the personal computer in every home. And then the 90s, all those computers got connected with the internet. And then in the 2000s, we have mobile computing, and now all that information is in our pockets. And it's great, but it's crazy now. It's like non-stop. It's just like the faucet open and it doesn't shut off. And while this is marvelous and it's an amazing breakthrough and we're happy we have it, it exposes a lot of nastiness too in the human condition. It's like, okay, we had this thought that more information, more knowledge, more connectivity will make the world a better place. But we kind of see the opposite sometimes. We see the exposure, just even in this past year, we're only a few months into the year, the amount of stuff that came out. The scandals, the files, the videos, the photos, the events, everyone analyzing the video from that angle to that angle, everyone having an opinion. Sad things too, terrible things. And I'm the first to say, I'd rather have the information out there than not out there. So I'm not against exposure. But it really makes me wonder and ask, what are we doing with all that? We have so much tons of knowledge, some information, but how are we stewarding it? How are we responding to it? What are we actually, is it helping us as a people? Tiring. I find it tiring sometimes. So I did a little research and I'm like, are we still in the information age or are we in some other age? And this is what some sociologists call it. We're actually in the post-information age. This is the characteristics. Everyone has near infinite access to information and it's just assumed. We just know whatever we get, the information is there. I remember as kids, we would actually have fights about information. What was Michael Jordan's highest scoring game? It was 50 points, no, it was 60 points. They would fight about it because we couldn't fact check each other. And just whoever had the strongest voice would win that fight. And we couldn't go look it up. Those conversations don't exist now. We just don't even ask, we just look it up. Access is assumed. But information is constant and overwhelming. So the problem is no longer how do I get it, how do I get information, but the problem is what do I trust? With all that noise, what is trustworthy? And what really matters? What's the information and knowledge that we have that really matters to us? What are the ones that we should really process and hold on to? And when I see the characteristics of post-information age, what I see is it's not a problem of knowledge and data and information. It's an issue of wisdom.
That's right.
We have a huge wisdom deprivation right now, deficit.
Yep.
And the more that knowledge and information grows, and now we have AI processing all that information for us, and the more wisdom we need. We need wisdom to undergird all that. One thing, I'm not like an anti-AI guy. I think it's great. It's a tool I use regularly. But what's interesting is once we start leveraging AI to make decisions for us, that's a problem because, yeah, it has all the information. It has data. It could think faster than us. It could make connections faster than us. But it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have a spirit to gain wisdom. So it could give the right answers. But, the right answer is not always the right way of living. We need godly wisdom to really direct our lives. And I'm just going to take a moment to share a little bit of a business case study to show you how all the information in the world could lead to destruction without wisdom. Okay, how many of you had a Blockbuster membership card? How many of you still have it? Why? It doesn't exist anymore. Brett had too much late fees. He kept the videos. But those of you who lived through the Blockbuster era, it was part of our American culture. Up into the late 90s, while the video rental market was actually dying, all the little mom and pops video stores were dying, all the other chains were dying, Blockbuster has a stronghold on the whole market. They were growing. They were a multi-billion-dollar industry. Nothing could touch them. They were going nowhere. And then here comes this little startup called Netflix. Who remembers Netflix before it was a streaming company? It was actually a DVD company. Yeah, that's how they started. You go online, you pick the movie, and they mail it to you, and they mail it back. So they came on the scene in 1997, little small guy. And in a couple of years, they were actually gaining some momentum, enough to where Blockbuster started paying attention to them. And they say, hey, is this Netflix something we should worry about? Yeah, and they did research. Multi-billion-dollar industry, they had all the consultants, all the market research, all the data, all the analysis. And this is what the data said. The data said, there's no issue, don't worry about Netflix. Blockbuster, the foot traffic is higher than ever. People are still coming to the stores. Rentals are high, sales are great. Rentals haven't gone down, rentals are still high, people are still coming in and renting DVDs. We have great revenue from late fees from people like Brett. We're making a ton, that's another revenue stream. So they say, don't worry about them. Fast forward 7 years, they're bleeding members because Netflix is taking over. Yep. And they were too late. 7 years later, they copied the exact model of Netflix and started operating it at a loss just to keep up with the times. This is the point. They had all the information in the world, but they didn't have the wisdom to understand the data correctly. Yep. Because what they didn't know was that, yes, people were still going to Blockbuster. Yes, they were still renting videos, but they hated the whole process. They hated going there. They hated having to go back to return it. They hated that they were tagged with late fees if they were a little late, a couple of days late. And Netflix knew that was the issue. They had the wisdom. See, the wisdom is kind of like, we understand the deeper levels of the human condition beyond just information to really navigate. So it's not a perfect analogy, but this is kind of what godly wisdom is like. So we don't need more data and knowledge. We need more wisdom. We need wisdom. We need godly wisdom to rule our lives, our families, our churches, our nation, all of humanity. Forget even just the collective scale, but even in our individual lives, how much data do we have on ourselves now? We could track our sleep, we could track our snoring, we could track our budget, we could track everything, our heartbeat, heart rate. But what are we doing with all that information? Is it really helping us improve? I'm not against it, once again. These are helpful things, but without wisdom, all the information in the world doesn't really matter. And when I see all the depravity and the perversion and the darkness in society today, it's because we lack godly wisdom. We become a society where we remove God so far from the picture that we're seeing the symptoms of it right now. And Paul actually talks about this in Romans 1. In Romans 1, verse 21, he goes, "For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. So they're saying, we don't need God, we are wise. He's talking about Roman society, honestly. He's saying, we have so much wisdom, we have so much advancements beyond any other time in history that we don't need God, and we could do it on our own. But what happens? You see the symptoms. You see idolatry, lust, sexual perversion, envy, murder. Paul lists all these things as symptoms of what happens when the wisdom of God is removed from people. The worldly godly wisdom, ultimately, godly wisdom is the revelation of the Father through the revelation of the Son. So who here on earth is responsible to shine godly wisdom? It's us, the church. We're the only ones that have access and have the responsibility to do that. But what I'm really grieved by, and I'm not very convinced, is I'm generally speaking here, not everyone, but generally speaking as a church, especially Church of Nation, are we really operating under godly wisdom? I don't know. Because when I read a passage like James 3, verse 13, this is what James says. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not wisdom that comes down from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, in harvest of righteousness sown in peace by those who make peace. Godly wisdom, wisdom from above, is pure. It's first pure, peaceable, impartial, sincere. And when I see what's going on in church, I don't know, man. I don't think I think we're still operating a lot under earthly human wisdom. It's not godly wisdom that's directing us. Yeah. We have so many opinions and judgments and ideas and ambitions. We should do it this way, you should do it that way. God should do it this way, God should do it that way. But without godly wisdom, what are we even talking about here? And that leads us to the crux of today's passage. So, in today's passage, what I seek to answer is the following questions. What is godly wisdom? What is godly wisdom founded upon? And what is our relationship as a church to this kind of wisdom? And just to give you some context around Paul's letter to the Corinthians, actually, I love reading Corinthians 1 and 2 because they're a hot mess. They're a hot mess. Like, what's going on in that church is insane. It's like Jerry Springer, Real Housewives, all the shows and reality shows in one. What's really remarkable is Paul absolutely loves this church. He's like the father of this church. He planted this church. He spent a year and a half in the city to proclaim Jesus and build this church out. So he has a very deep connection. And what's wild is that this church that Father loves so much, the church does not treat him well. They go, Paul, give me your credentials. What's your credentials that gives you authority? I mean, he founded the church, right? And there's a lot of grief in Paul's letter. There's a lot of, And this is the beginning. So what happens is that he planted the church. He was there for a year and a half. Now he's off to another city. I think he's in Ephesus. And then he receives a report. And he's talking, and then they hear everything that's going on in the church of Corinth. So there's division, there's sexual immorality, a guy sleeping with his mother-in-law. There's lawsuits, there's idolatry, there's abuse of the spiritual gifts. So there's a whole laundry list of stuff. And Paul will address every single one of them throughout the letter. But he begins with this interesting argument about wisdom, because I think he's getting at the heart of the matter. He's saying these are all symptoms, and the problem is that he's going after human wisdom. You see, to understand Corinth, you gotta understand their background a little. Corinth was a very, very proud city. They were strategically located between two major ports. So it was the heart of, in the ancient Near East, it was the heart of commerce. Commerce brought all these cultures together. It brought, great things like the arts, theater, and also brought in what they call like the sophists, like the wise speakers. All the intellects of the world, all the intellects of the Greek world come and have their podium, and they'll speak their eloquent things, and people gravitate towards it. It was like a form of entertainment. And it was a highbrow culture. And when I read about Corinth, it's not so different from our area, exactly. New York City.
Excellent.
Yeah. Because we have a high value on intelligence and wisdom and culture, whether you know it or not. And it's not about what grade school you went to. You don't even have to go to any school. We're all about smarts, book smarts, street smarts, money smarts. It's all about how well you work people and how well you move, how smooth talking you are. It's kind of like our culture. We put a premium on all those things. And what Paul is getting at is saying, you Corinthians, you still have that worldly culture and value system in your mind. That's the cause of all these issues. That's the cause of all these divisions. And he's getting at the heart of it. So one thing that the Corinthians and much of the Greek that they really respected and they really admired was this thing called rhetoric. Rhetoric was it's like an art form of communicating wisdom. And these are the three pillars of rhetoric. It's logos, logic and reasoning. How well can you communicate? How well is what you communicate? Is it logical? Is it reasonable? Does it make sense to the human mind? Ethos, the person who shares the wisdom. How credible are they? What's their character like? Are they someone trustworthy? And then pathos, when they speak, how can they even not just be heady and reasonable, but can they get at the heart? Can they connect to the emotional appeal? And here's the general outlook from this kind of attitude and worldview. Careful reasoning and skillful speaking will help us discover truth and live well together. They're saying that with just us as people, if we just reason well, speak well, communicate well, we'll figure out how to be a thriving community, a thriving people group. And I say this is the basis of leadership and politics today, but I don't know. Yeah. But up to a certain point, you can even say modern politics really value these three things too, right? We look at the presidents of the past, we go, how well were they, how well spoken are they, how credible were their character, how well can they really get at the American heart? So really, even today, this value system from the Greek world continued through the modern Western society. And this is what Paul is battling. So let's get to the text. So chapter 1, I'll start at verse 17. I'm reading from the ESV. So he opens up his argument with this. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, and not with words of eloquent wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be empty of its power. Just to give you a little context, Paul is not dismissing baptism, and he's not saying baptism is against preaching the gospel, but what's going on is if you read the passage right before, one of the issues of division that's happening in the church is that they are lining up with different leaders. So there's Paul, there's Apollos, there's Peter, and they're imposing their value system from the Greek world of who's wise, who speaks the best, who has the most knowledge, and they're creating like factions lining up saying I'm a person of Paul, I'm a person of Apollos, I'm a person of Peter, and then they're even saying, oh, Apollos baptized me, I'm an Apollos guy. So now they're starting to pervert the gospel and start lining up with these people because they're still functioning under the worldly value system of human wisdom. And what Paul's argument here is he's completely juxtaposing the message of the cross against human wisdom. He's saying, you're here, but this is the cross. And what Paul is not saying is that, what we're not saying is that, we're not saying just throw human wisdom out the window. We're not saying it has no value. Yes, Be wise, have human wisdom, use it as a tool. But what he's really getting at is, what are you trusting in ultimately? It's the same thing as, a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Adam talked about savings, right? He said, yes, there's human wisdom in saving money. Saving so you have an emergency fund that you don't, you're not living paycheck to paycheck. So if you have the ability to do it, yes, save up and have those emergency funds. But he's saying what's wrong is not doing that, it's putting your trust in that. This is the same thing. He's saying, what are you trusting in more, wisdom or the power of the cross? So in verse 18, he goes, for the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and the discernment of the discerning. I will thwart. So once again, here, it's a matter of trust. What are you trusting more? Is it the word of the cross? Yes, if you're operating under the mindset and the value system of the Greek human wisdom, there's nothing about the cross is wise. It's foolish. It's foolish to the world. But those who lived it, those who were impacted by it, those who let the cross shape your life, transform you, save you, you know that what we call foolish is actually the power of God. This is what Gordon Fee says. The cross is foolishness to the perishing, but by means of it, God has himself thereby rendered as foolish the world's wisdom. Wisdom that merely belongs to the sphere of human self-sufficiency. So this is what it's about self-sufficiency. God has not simply made such wisdom appear foolish by means of the cross. God has actually turned the tables on such wisdom altogether so that it has been made into the very opposite. Foolishness. You see, the difference between human wisdom and godly wisdom is not intellect, it's not knowledge, it's not how well spoken it is. The difference between the divine wisdom of God and the cross is hope, the power of hope. It's the power of the cross that saves people. It's the power of the cross that takes people out of utter darkness, pulls them out. What human intellect can handle sin? What human ideology can take care of the human deprivation problem? Apart from Jesus, there's no solution to a cosmic problem. And that's really the issue we have with politics today. Politics became such a religion. We worship politics as a people because they believe that it's the ultimate. Doesn't matter which camp, this camp or that camp, you're saying, oh, in my natural wisdom, this camp has all the right answers, and if I just worship this and push this forward, all our problems are solved. That's the issue of politics. And politics tries to have all the benefits of God's kingdom without God. It's not possible. You can't have the kingdom without the king. And that's why we need divine wisdom. So let's continue. Verse 20. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. So here, Paul calls out the Jews and the Greeks, and he's actually identifying two major idolatries that's getting in the way of them really understanding and receiving the gospel in its fullest depth. So when he says the Jews demand signs, he's talking about the messianic expectations that the Jews held for so long. They have a history of God moving powerfully with different signs, getting them out of Egypt through the Exodus. And their idea of the Messiah was the same. It's like God did it that way before, and this is how you should do it now. So when Jesus shows up, they go, show me signs, authenticate yourself. See, they already put God in. They had an idea of what God should do, what God should be like, and that was their idolatry, their picture of God. They said they had God all figured out. And on the other end, it says the Greeks seek wisdom. And this is another idolatry. It's a nationalistic idolatry. Once again, it's the Roman Empire that credit themselves, their wisdom. It was the highest point of human society in technology, in politics, and economics. And they said, we got here this far with our own wisdom. So anything that fits in our box of reason and logic, that is where God should be. So God has to make sense to us. If God doesn't make sense, then we don't want anything to do with it. So that's another idolatry that Paul is pointing out. This is what Gordon Fee says. These are the two basic idolatries, and they are ever with us. The demand for power and the insistence on wisdom, always for us or from our point of view, are still basic idolatries of our fallen world, and hear this, which also have the unfortunate habit of sneaking their way into the community of faith. God help us. The minute we start thinking, God must do it like this, God must do it like that, or the minute we say, it doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, what God did doesn't make sense, the minute we start thinking like that, we're not serving the God of the universe. We're putting him in our own idolatry boxes and our own ways of thinking. God could do whatever he wants. Here's the thing with the cross. This is why the cross is the wisdom of God, because when Jesus showed up and he died on the cross for our sins and was raised again, he didn't appeal to our reason. He didn't go explaining, this is why I'm doing it, let me help you understand. Or I'm sorry, Jews, I'm sorry I disappointed you. No, it was the powerful act of the cross that just did it. It was this divine act, and it didn't matter. No questions are asked. If we just believe and receive, we don't care why God did it that way. We don't care why that doesn't make sense. The point is that he did it, and we could receive it, and we could access everything from it. That is the wisdom of God. He doesn't stoop to our level to try to explain to every little detail. That is the God we want to serve. That is why Jesus is the power of God and the wisdom of God to those who have been impacted by the cross. And at the end, Paul's being cheeky here. He's saying, therefore, even the foolishness of God is wiser than men. What you think is foolish doesn't matter in your standards. It's strong, it's wiser. What you think is weak, it doesn't matter. If it's from God, it's stronger than anything that we think is strong. So what does that mean for us? What that means is if we want to walk in godly wisdom, we got to reevaluate everything through the lens of the cross. Everything. A cruciform life is one that is completely redefined and shaped and submitted under God's value system through complete trust in him. So let me ask you, are there areas in your life where you trust your own human wisdom over God's because his way doesn't make sense, or you're not getting the answers you want? In your finances, in your relationships, in your job, your hopes, your troubles, your past, present, future. Is it anywhere where you're not really trusting God and you're trusting your own wisdom? Because if you are, the cross hasn't penetrated deep enough. Once again, the heart of it is about trust. In the heart of God's wisdom, presented by the cross, lies the spirit and power ability to trust in him completely. Divine wisdom is divine trust. Guys, the wisest thing we could do for our lives is trust God completely. There's nothing, it may seem foolish to people, but it's the wisest thing we could do. That is ultimate wisdom. Okay, verse 26. So now Paul gives two examples to further his point and make his case. First with the Corinthians and then with himself. So verse 26, he goes, consider your foolish, brothers. Not many of you are wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were noble of birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And because of him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption, so that, as it is written, let one who boasts boast in the Lord. God always starts at the bottom. He always starts at the bottom for this very reason. The Corinthians, I think the church of Corinth was a mixed group. I'm sure there was affluent, wealthy people, but I think majority of them were people who weren't too noble in Corinthian standards. When Paul showed up in the middle of Corinth and to preach the gospel, I'm sure it was a lot of the lowly people that was attracted to the gospel because God starts at the bottom. He's pointing at the irony. He's like, right now you guys are posturing yourself in this whole wisdom battle, wisdom debate with this sophistication and Corinthian values, but look at you. Who of you were even wise or noble or in that high stature? You know, he's saying, isn't that ironic? Then all of a sudden you have the gospel and you're trying to add to it with these other worldly values. Look at you guys. You guys are evidence that God's wisdom is maybe foolish to the world, but it's something else. And what he's really doing is he's flipping over the whole worldly value system on its head when he starts at the bottom, when he starts with the weak, when he starts with the foolish. This is what N.T. Wright says. The Christian good news is all about God dying on a rubbish heap at the wrong end of the empire. It's all about God babbling nonsense to a room full of philosophers. It's all about the true God confronting the world of posturing, power, and prestige and overthrowing it in order to set up his own kingdom, a kingdom which the weak and the foolish find themselves just as welcome as the strong and the wise, if not more so. The cross is the ultimate neutralizer. Everything is ground level at the foot of the cross. So when you see leaders in ministry who leverage their ministry for status and personal gain, to manipulate, to control, they're playing a dangerous game because they're steering so far from the gospel. How much they must be grieving Jesus because they missed the whole point. The gospel didn't go deeper into them. But even in our own lives, I'm guilty of this too, we're doing good, we're doing all the spiritual disciplines in the book, we're in a good rhythm, we feel good, God is blessing us, and then our coworker who's living in darkness, you just kind of like look at them like, what a moron. Or you kind of shake their head at them. You start feeling a little spiritually superior, right? If that's what we're feeling, where we feel a little better, the cross hasn't gotten deep into us. Deep enough. Spend time at the foot of the cross and get humbled graciously. Because when the cross is really deep into us, our response is not a feeling of superiority, but our heart should be broken for the people who don't have the eyes to see, who think the word of the cross is foolish. And we should extend a hand and help them see that the cross is not foolish after all. It's the wisdom and power of God. So really, we gotta keep letting the cross penetrate deeper and deeper because we can't boast. God left no room to boast in anything we do to add to our salvation. That is the wisdom of God. No one, nothing. So we could only boast in the Lord and not ourselves. Thank you, son. Okay, and then we're getting there. Now the next example, Paul uses himself. And I, when I came to you, brother, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith may not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Paul shows up in the middle of Corinth where they're so used to hearing all these high-power, sophisticated speeches. People travel all from the world to give their best case and reason and with very well-written poetic prose. And Paul shows up and he goes, Jesus was a man crucified. And I think we don't appreciate the madness of what Paul did because 2,000 years later, we see the cross with such reverence of glory. But in the first century, that was absolute madness. It was disgusting that you don't even talk about it. It's almost like you're invited to like some fancy dinner table and you're talking about roadkill you saw on the street. That's like what talking about a crucifixion was. But here's Paul lining up in the same stage as everyone else, and he's saying Jesus was the Christ crucified. Utter madness. But here Paul's saying, look, I'm evidence that what you think is wise and powerful is nothing, because I showed up with this crazy talk about Christ crucified, God crucified, and look what happened. The power of the Spirit broke out. There was healing, there was miracles, there was life transformed. It had nothing to do with how well I packaged it or how sensible my proclamation sounded. That is the power of the cross proclaimed. So this is my encouragement to you guys. As you of carriers of God's divine wisdom, you don't have to worry about how well you speak, how well studied you are. I mean, those are good things, and work on those things. I'm not against it, but the power is not in those things. The power is in the testimony of the cross in your life, testimony in others, and you just preach Jesus, you just share Jesus, and the Spirit will do its thing. You don't have to come and try to sound like the next, great evangelist, revivalist. We don't need that. We just need the power and message of the cross to really deliver His power and wisdom. Okay, just going to finish the rest of the chapter. So verse 6, yet among the mature we do impart wisdom. So Paul's saying, okay, I'm not saying all wisdom's bad. There is a type of wisdom that we do impart, and he's talking about here now divine wisdom. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age, of the ruler of the age, who are doomed to pass away, but we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages of our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. So when he's talking about rulers of the age, he's talking about the power structure, the Roman leaders, the Jewish leaders that put Jesus on the cross. He's saying this wisdom of the cross. So once again, he's not saying like we carry some secret, special wisdom that we keep as a secret to ourselves. He's saying that it was hidden from all of mankind until it was time to be revealed. So that's why even the authorities who put Jesus on the cross had no idea. If they knew what God was doing, they wouldn't have done that. So he's saying even this wisdom was so hidden, was so secret that God planned it from the beginning, and now it's ours. It's imparted to us. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. These things God revealed to us through the Spirit. For the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? And also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit of who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God, and we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. When we carry the wisdom of God, the people who don't are going to think we're ridiculous. We're going to seem foolish. But of course, because they don't operate under the same spirit that we do. They have a completely flipped over value system, a completely different mindset. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. But we have the mind of Christ. So I'm just going to kind of summarize what Paul is getting at here. He's saying, now that we have the Spirit of the Lord, this is the same Spirit that is the Lord, so it could discern the things of the Lord that's in us, which means we have access to what God is thinking. We have access to his wisdom. And because of that, we are no longer earthly, soulish people that operate under human wisdom. We are spirit people, spirit-empowered people that have access to God's perspective, to God's revelation, to God's wisdom. We got to start looking at everything differently. We got to rethink everything. And that's why Paul sets up his letter with this at first, because now he's redefining all the issues that the church is going through this lens, having God's perspective, having the mind of Christ. And he's saying, because we share the mind of Christ, we got to stop being divided over the things that the people of the world divide themselves over in the name of wisdom. It's silly. We don't have that mindset anymore. We can't see it like they do anymore. So why are we still divided over these foolish things? And if this is the standard that Paul is setting for the church in Corinthians, fast forward 2,000 years, I don't know how much progress we really made, honestly, in that regard. How far are we from that mark? How far are we from that bar today? And I don't want to, I'm not saying this to be discouraged, but here's an opportunity, at least for us. I want us to really make this a priority, to seek God's wisdom, to be wise together, to be the mind of Christ together as a community, so we could start acting correctly and being a wise light to the world as they need from us. So really my encouragement is let's grow wise together. Let's get wise together by seeking the mind of Christ. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So how do we cultivate wisdom? I'm glad to know. Here are some thoughts. Number one, remember, we share the mind of Christ. It's not I have the mind of Christ or pastor has the mind of Christ. We have the mind of Christ. No single individual holds the whole truth. So we are wiser in community. We got to be together. We got to discern with each other. We got to bounce wisdom off each other. And we got to work it out together. Jesus is our wisdom. Jesus is our wisdom. The more time we spend with Jesus in intimacy in the secret place, the more wisdom will be imparted. David says this in Psalm 51. Behold, you delight in truth in the inward being, and you teach me wisdom in the secret heart. Wisdom doesn't come from out there. It doesn't come from our smartphones, or it comes from the inner place, time with the Lord. And I think this is what even the spiritual disciplines is about. All these disciplines we're learning, it's not just to get healthier and sharper, but we get wiser. Wisdom comes in maturity. It's a natural byproduct. So keep building that inner life, because that's the only way we could get wisdom and hold wisdom. Wisdom requires active seeking in the Lord. We got to inquire. We got to ask. We got to seek. We got to seek it out. It's not just default like osmosis. It just gets soaked in. Proverbs 2 says, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Seek it out like silver. Seek it like the next thing you want, Spend time seeking wisdom. Ask for it. God's wisdom may look foolish in the eyes of the world. Remember, that's Paul's whole argument, right? To the eyes of the world, God's wisdom may look foolish. So we cannot merely trust the opinion of man to discern what is wise. We must know the voice of God. Think about Joshua when God told him to walk around Jericho 7 times. Who in their right mind would say, yeah, that's a sound plan, right? Right? It's absolute crazy. But he wasn't influenced by what people thought. He knew it was God's voice, and that was what committed the breakthrough, right? Even Moses, it's like, yeah, just show up in front of Pharaoh and say, set my people free. That's crazy. But if you know it's from the Lord, it's wisdom because it works and it's the right thing. All right, almost done. Operating under godly wisdom is not a superhuman ability. It's not some special thing we gain. It's actually bringing us back to normal, how we were designed to function in the first place. We were always designed to operate under the wisdom of the Lord. And I just want to share a piece from Abner's book, Trust, that really defines this well. He goes, at creation, God intended that Adam, and therefore humanity, view the world through 2 types of knowledge, sensory and revelatory. Sensory knowledge is that which is perceived through the realm of the 5 senses, sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. Through sensory knowledge, Adam saw that the grass was green, the ocean was blue, and Eve was beautiful. He heard the birds in the trees and the God's voice in the garden each evening. These elements allow Adam to perceive the world through God's lens. Sensory knowledge, though God-given, was vitally important, but was limited. Our senses are far too limited. We were never created to just operate on their own 5 senses. Here's revelatory knowledge. Adam could only discover his purpose through revelatory knowledge. This is wisdom, divine wisdom. Revelation is defined as that which is revealed, appropriately the disclosure of truth to the men by God himself. Adam could not discover the reason for his existence through his 5 senses. Adam's purpose was found outside of himself. He could only find it through his creator. It was not until God spoke his blessing over Adam and commanded him to have dominion that the world could become as God intended. Words from the heart of God were spoken to Adam and Eve so they could place their trust in God and forever be established in the truth. that is what divine wisdom does. It creates relationship with him so that we could trust him and follow him and obey him. Final point. God's wisdom is activated through obedience. His wisdom is not only content that is to be known, but is a divine directive that must be walked out. Trust and obedience is what turns us into the realm of wisdom. So once again, it's not just knowledge. It's like, oh, God told me this, and I could just, I just know it. It's usually an action. It's usually a directive. Wisdom is walked out. It's exemplified. It's lived out. So that is what we must do as a people. Amen. So I hope you got a little wiser after my sermon today. And let's continue our journey in cultivating divine wisdom in our lives. So it could be a blessing to, just the people around us and really just be the people of God as he intended. Amen.